Hello everybody, welcome back. Sunday night, I think it's the 16th of November. We got a crazy good show. We got a story that'll blow your mind from 2011. Oh, it's a doozy. I'm going to kick it off with a song. You can find it. It says I was offline that time. Come on. This is called nuclear exceptionalism. Just give me 1 second. Hi, Dana. I just put a link in the description to the site with this music on it. We'll see in just a couple of minutes. I'll be right back. That's wrong. This is right.
They said it was clean, too cheap to meter. Built the dome, then cooked the beaker. Said the rod was safe as sealed in drums, but left them leaking out of Idaho slums. Hallelujah, being anti-nuclear's not dumb. Hallelujah, being anti-nuclear is fun. Hallelujah, being anti-nuclear has won. Hallelujah, nuclear exceptionalism is done. They chase the sun, all fusion proud. Ignore the barrels stacked in clouds. Promise stars in every socket, while curium settled in the market. Hallelujah, being anti-nuclear's not dumb. Hallelujah, being anti-nuclear is fun. Hallelujah, being anti-nuclear has won. Hallelujah, nuclear exceptionalism is done. Chart is clean, while whales rolled up inside the submarine. Blame the algae, blame the rain, but never trace the gamma chain. Hallelujah, being anti-nuclear's not dumb. Hallelujah, being anti-nuclear is fun. Hallelujah, being anti-nuclear has won. Hallelujah, nuclear exceptionalism is done. Now the rods are rusting, the record spins. Mama warned them, too many sins. Keep your son, keep your lab coat pride, till you fix the waste you tried to hide. Hallelujah, being anti-nuclear's not dumb. Hallelujah, being anti-nuclear is fun. Hallelujah, being anti-nuclear has won. Hallelujah, nuclear exceptionalism is done.
That's so cool, man. Just wonderful. All right, time to get busy here. Conference of parties, we're going to switch over to the big screen, the big shut screen for everybody with the little tiny devices. You got a doozy. We got a friggin' doozy. So what, when you ask the crazies, what is climate change, they'll say the science is settled. You say, yeah, but what is, well, the science is settled, Dana. Yeah, I know that, thank you. But what's the science? Well, don't worry about it because it's settled. Oh, okay. So, me being a weirdo, I went and looked it up myself. So United Nations won't tell you, I guess I'll tell you. This is how United Nations came up with climate change. And they weaponize them now against 8 million species, and you're one of them. An interview with the father of global warming. You're saying that's not, global warming is not United Nations, it's somebody else? Yep. In 2012, there was an interview with the hockey stick guy, Wallace Brocker. He's the cool dude. He come up with global warming. Man, oh man, we paid for that. Since he came out with his little paper, United Nations, like, I'll take that. Another paper United Nations came out with was Moyles Allen's paper called Net Zero. Oh, net zero, Dana. And so, global warming sound familiar to you? How about net zero? Does that sound familiar to you? The United Nations screeches it from every corner of every room on the planet. Carbon footprint, and how can we bring yours down, was a public relation campaign by, you guessed it, BP Oil. So they hired a whole bunch of media, and he came up with this narrative that you're the reason the oil spills happen, not because they bought derelict ships to sell for enormous amounts of money of oil, and he get it from the war-torn country for next to nothing. And so when the ship breaks up and destroys the whole ecosystem, it was your fault because of your carbon footprint, not because they're a vulture company trying to capitalize on what everybody needs. The world works on oil. It doesn't work on peanuts. The campaign was intended to divert attention from the fossil fuel industry onto individual consumers and instructed people to calculate their personal, and instructed people. The BPL instructed everybody out there, you slaves, calculate yourselves. Stop looking at us. United Nations was like, sweet, I'll take that one too. So carbon footprint, net zero, and global warming. That only leaves one weirdo out there unaccounted for. These are the 4 papers that United Nations use to bludgeon everybody with every day of the week. These settle the science. These 4 people are the people that settled the science. And 3,500 scientists agree with these 4 scientists. They didn't peer review it or something like that. No, but they agree. They agree. He's best known for his research into climatology. And in his 1988 congressional testimony on climate change. That sounds familiar. I know this guy, he's the father of global warming, which was Wallace Brocker. Moyles Allen, he's the father of net zero. BP Oil, who contaminated all of Alaska with oil. They're the father of the carbon footprint. And Two Guns Hansen, he raised his 15 minutes in front of Congress, raised broad awareness of global warming. His testimony, his 15 minutes in front of Congress, settled the science. He said, NASA was pretty short, so everybody had to go, okay, well, NASA's God. You're not allowed to question NASA. Hansen's testimony was an important turning point in the history of the global climate change. And it was a pivotal moment, actually. It was a pivotal moment and ignited public discussion of global warming, an official beginning of the global warming policy debate. It was James Hansen. So one more time. This is the 4 papers, one written by Wallace Brocker, and it was about global warming. And so the United Nations got that paper from him. They got net zero paper from Moyles Allen. Professor Moyles Allen. He got a pretty cushy job once he gave up the rights to that. BP Oil was the carbon footprint. That's third paper, and the fourth paper was a shyster of the worst type of person imaginable. James Hansen is one of the worst humans imaginable. He's around telling everybody radiation from a nuclear meltdown is like flying on an airplane. Okay. So that's the four papers. That's the foundation for United Nations assertion that the science is settled on climate change. And those four papers have never been peer-reviewed on top of that. And I was like, well, look at that there. You know how long it took me to find it? Just a couple of minutes. I had all four of them nailed down. Because I went out and asked a question looking for the answer, and it was James Hansen, Miles Allen, Wallace Brocker, and BPO. That's the four papers that are being used to bludgeon planet Earth and the 8 million species. And they have bludgeoned it pretty severely. And the solution is nuclear. Except the problem is actually caused by radioactive fallout. Global warming is real. It's radioactive fallout. Well, just the fallout from Japan, these 14 prefectures were barred from importing food by 55 countries. Because it's not like flying on an airplane or climbing a mountain or bananas or any other lies they've been telling you for 80 years. Thousands march outside of Conference of Parties 30, better known around here as Constipated Party. 30 years they haven't done anything. That's constipation, isn't it? Am I being mean by calling it constipated parties when they haven't accomplished anything for 30 years? And they spent some whack of money in 30 years. They brought a police state with them everywhere they went for 30 years. No different this time. They got the military. Brazil, if you know anything about the military in Brazil, you know these crazies. These people are just, they're in a war zone as it is in their own country. But that's not the people you need at a climate conference. Yeah, I guess in Brazil you might need them, I suppose. Brazil's got its share of violence. Most of the thousands, there's no really big evidence of that many, were the native community. There's nobody there they just don't want the Amazon destroyed, and appropriately so, right? They built, and I got a bunch of pictures I hunted down of the 8-mile highway they built out there, and the background of that. I'm going to cover that. But then we got a crazy story. I got one of the craziest stories you're ever going to hear coming up. It's worth hanging around for. It's about Fukushima. It's about J Village, where they're now having the Deaf Olympics, 2025 Tokyo Olympics. They're in a nuclear wasteland, not Tokyo, which is actually a nuclear wasteland. So I'm not going to do too good tonight because the censorship is going to burn me. Should Conference of Parties 30 hold Conference of Parties 31 to Fukushima Daiichi, eat only the local food, and drink the water from nuclear tanks? You don't got to worry about protesters. Protesters are stupid, but when it comes to nuclear, it's not their fault. But they're certainly not going to go to a nuclear meltdown. So these people have been led to believe the James Hansen's, the Miles Allen, the Wallace Brocker, and the BP oil narrative. They've never heard a real conversation or debate. And the debates are always with people that regurgitate those narratives, and they're the same pictures they show you, right? Everybody's, you're seeing at these protests is focused on oil, gas, coal, global warming, United Nations. And look what they got there. This is the actual Brazilian military. Man, the delegates were very uncomfortable that somebody would even talk to them, let alone question their narrative. But like talking to these UN people, good luck. They don't stop and talk to people. They're the most arrogant people you'll ever meet because they're chicken necks, right? They're beat up their whole childhood because they were the teachers' pets. They went to university, they got degree after degree after degree because they were dysfunctional. They couldn't do anything but just stay in school. That's the only spot they've ever felt where they belong. They get their degree instead of like somebody else will run out and get a job. Nope. And the UN and the nuclear industry will pick them up because they're function. Most of these people with the $5,000 suits are functional autism. Protect the Amazon. Climate protesters demand protect the Amazon, right? And so all the media's out there screeching the same narratives and climate change. And there could have been 1,000 protesters, and they would have been given water because they were the perfect protesters, right? The native community is not generally. They're kind of overwhelmed. You just came into their little. I don't know how. There's still people in the Amazons have been isolated from humanity. They're isolated tribes, right? Some fascinating stories. But they're feeling the pressure because the Amazon is dying from the radioactive fallout from Japan. I'll show you coming up later. And look at this. This is the military. Like last year's Conference of Parties 29 had around 12,000 military and police and Navy and Mossad, CIA, and MI6. Excuse me. They're sticking it to me tonight. Oh, shit. They're burning me on the bandwidth here. I don't know why. I don't know what I've done to them. I just wanted some hard rock candy. I have a gigabyte up and a gigabyte down internet bandwidth. It's pretty impressive, right? And these shows use 5.6 megabytes. Not even a gigabyte. I have over 1,000 gigabytes a second. Or I'm sorry, I have a gigabyte a second. 1,000 megabytes. And I'm going to use 5.6 out of 1,000 megabytes to stream these shows that we've been doing for how long? Forever now. I've been at it. So my telephone number, you can call in here in Canada, 709-740-4076. Just ask for Dr. Verified. Everything's verified. If I showed it to you, it's verified. And that's up for, you can debate that. Unlike United Nations where you're not allowed to debate, you can call in, well, you get heard out. If you found wanting, you get called out. And we'll move on to the next one. There's no hard feelings. So, am I even streaming? Because the bandwidth says I got no bandwidth. That's right, Darlene. They're full of shit, yeah. Hello, everybody. So I'm streaming okay, am I? And the reason I'm saying that is because I got the yellow banner of death right there. I was just checking to see if, yeah, it is so, James. James Music Wonderful. You better believe that. It's a great way for me. It's wicked for me to start a show off and end the show with something that I really like in music. I don't have to worry about copyright. And it's tuned in, right? It's switched on material. In fact, you might never hear a better anti-nuclear song than the song we started off with. There are links to that original song in the description. But look at this. I haven't got enough bandwidth. Are you guys getting a good stream? Is anybody? Yeah, Colette says fine. I'll just leave it like that for a second. Just to see if everybody's getting a good stream. If Colette's getting a good stream, that generally means we're getting a good stream out there, right? We're generally getting a good stream. I'll assume we're getting a good stream. I will. So they got the military right out in front of the main gate to scare the natives away, because the natives I actually went in and yelled at them. They were like, please, I think I shit my pants. Conference of Parties 30, old promises, new targets. 30 years. Well, I use it as a metaphor, constipated parties. But yeah, full of shit is true. Absolutely true. Is Conference of Parties 30 relevant anymore? So there's a lot, not a lot, but there's some dissenting voices out there. Dana had some issues by the sounds of it. Is that true, Dana? He's saying good now, but I still got the yellow banner of death. If it disappears, then I'll bring up the screen and say that just disappeared. That way we got a record of. I got nobody on my show because of the headline, right? Because of my poll. I don't like my poll. But I'm going to explain that coming up. I'm going to quantify that assertion, that poll. I'm not doing that just to be mean. A little bit, maybe, but I'm not trying to be mean though. They know the difference. They're not naive, right? They're going to pretend Fukushima never happened. That's exactly what International Atomic Energy Agency, UNSCLEAR, ERPA, the IPRC, the little parasites, the legs of the octopus of UN, which is bizarre, man. They got some bizarre subsidy companies besides IAEA and ERPA and UNSCLEAR and the IPRC. Conference of Party 30 summit urged to propel the global climate governance. So a new world order, right, which is what George Bush Sr. called UN. Eisenhower called them the military-industrial complex because you had 195 militaries all of a sudden who signed on post-Hiroshima and Nagasaki. Let's bring up George Bush Sr. He called UN the New World Order, which is a reference of a global government. So it's really interesting to see that. Most people will call it racketeering. What UN is doing, this should be prosecuted, and it could be, but they gave themselves immunity. And I set the volume. I'll bring the volume back up in a second.
We have before us the opportunity to forge for
This is
ourselves
United
and for
Nations.
future generations a new world order, a world where the rule of law, not the law of the jungle, governs the conduct of nations. When we are successful,
It's a bit
and we will
scratchy.
be, we have a real chance at this new world order, an order in which a credible United Nations can use its peacekeeping role to fulfill the promise and vision of the UN's founders.
Of the UN founders, which is United Nations. So United Nations is so-called New World Order, right? And so they want to be the global governance, and so you got to give them all the money. So their whole house of cards is held up by 195 countries donating to them every year, and they'll burn through that every year. They find ways, because it's about expanding. It's all about nuclear industry. There's 1 million companies dependent upon the nuclear industry on top of that. That is not illegal to poison you with radiation. That's where they're getting away with it, which is, they got that. They're a corporate. According to the Paris Agreement, adopted by 195 parties, it wasn't parties, it was 195 people from 195 countries, sold out 195 countries by signing on to something that there should have been a referendum for in 195 countries. Should have referendums. Do we do this? And do we do that? And do we give up our liberties and freedoms? And so this was used to be League of Nations, changed their name to United Nations post-Hiroshima and Nagasaki, and went in flattened North Korea, which was occupied for 50 years by Japan. To that point, they left because of Hiroshima and Nagasaki. UN went in there, called it a police action, and dropped more munitions than the entire World War II on this little tiny country known as North Korea. who was just isolated and occupied for 50 years by a brutal Japanese regime to combat climate change. So a decade ago, which is those papers I showed you, that's when they all came out. And the United Nations took those 4 papers and held this scam, this Ponzi scheme, this racketeering organization in France, and called it the Paris Agreement, the Accord to the Paris Agreement. And so this is why we're all being destroyed with incredible taxes based on 4 papers created by everybody but United Nations, the signatories. So these people visit United Nations, which doesn't have any sovereignty over any country, who makes an agreement with 195 countries who go along with this organization that is non-governmental, that has immunity worldwide to the crimes they commit, and they're taking over every facet of humanity on this entire planet. They have infiltrated I was watching a video yesterday of UN Global Women. And so they have this incredible setup, unbelievably expensive setup, to influence women and girls in particular worldwide. So everybody's got to wait till UN tells them what to do in it's happening right now. It's done through government, but soon they'll be just announcing themselves as gods and entities that they have no right to interfere in 195 countries. They're also 195 military, so they're very difficult to deal with because they're so arrogant and because they're unreasonable on top of that, where they insist that the science is settled when the science is 4 lousy papers that haven't been peer reviewed on top of that. Guthrie with the UN calls for a clear pathway to mobilize $1.3 trillion US dollars each year, and give it to the United Nations. They'll figure out how to fix everything. Every year they want at least in a pathway annually, and that includes $300 billion per year in contributions from developed countries. So they want at least that much each year from the 195 signatory countries. Is $300 billion a year just for that facet of their endless subsidy organization, right? So this organization, think about you build your own. I was thinking about it when I was young. I like to build my own mall. I'd have my own clothes shop, my own grocery store that would, get food from the farmers, and we would start up little factories and everything. I wanted my own hairdressing salon, my own laundromats, my own this, my own that, right? On my own mall. And just my products or whatever the case may be. Because when you were young, you were led to believe that was the solution instead of the community, the little business in the communities would always spend their taxes back in their country, right? They pay taxes. The big corporations don't pay state, federal, local taxes. But the mom and pops did. The mom and pops hired the locals, and then so they were always employing people, and they were always spending money in the community, where the corporations are just taking it. As soon as you put your money into a big corporation payment machine, that money is straight out offshore accounts, right? Because they're corporate personhood. They don't pay state, federal, local taxes. So you make your country poorer every time you deal with a corporate personhood, a franchise, which is a franchise basically. And now they've taken over your planet. Conference of Parties 30, which runs through November the 21st, brings together representatives from nearly 200 countries to focus on the efforts needed to limit the global temperature increases to 1.5 degrees Celsius, which of course is batshit crazy to suggest you're going to limit the temperature on planet Earth. This is a huge planet. So limit the temperature based upon 4 papers. So you have Wallace Brocker, the father of global warming. You have Miles Allen, the father of net zero. You got BP Oil, the father of carbon footprint. You have James Hansen, the father of climate change, and whose testimony saying that NASA, they're pretty confident. That's the paper. They're confident. Well, they shouldn't be peer reviewed. Those assertions that are used to bludgeon humanity with. His testimony was an important turning point in the history of global climate change. So climate change, his testimony was pivotal, right? That the official beginning of the global warming policy debate was a 15-minute speech and a paper by this guy. BP Oil, as the carbon footprint, was a public relations scam to blame you instead of the people that created it in the first place, BP Oil. Net Zero was another paper, and Wallace Brocker paper for global warming. James Hansen, climate change. So climate change, global warming, net zero, and carbon footprint. Does that sound familiar? Am I wrong? Am I missing anything here? Okay, let's keep it going. Brutal censorship again tonight, is it? That's okay. Because I'm censored don't mean the story's not real. The focus of the efforts need to limit the global temperature increase. It's a total scam to suggest you could do it, and it's a total scam to suggest. Now, it's much hotter than that, is why I'm saying that. Right, the ocean's heated up to over 7 degrees above what it traditionally would be, because of the nuclear event in 2011 was a pulse event that wrecked the planet. It's 80 years of nuclear fallout is already out there worldwide, pulsing energy at the speed of light every second. Global warming is 100% real. All the species die off, all the emaciated whales, all the emaciated birds, all the emaciated seals, emaciated sea lions, emaciated owls, emaciated this, emaciated... Every species out there, all the birds, the insect-eating birds almost disappearing. 46 million migratory birds have disappeared out of here. The biggest migratory run on the entire planet for seabirds. Been coming here for millions of generations to raise their fledglings over summer. And all the cliffs would be full of excrement up until post-2011. So they didn't go somewhere else. They've been coming here for millions of generations. They're not going to change their route, right? They're not going somewhere else. They're gone. The new National Action Plan, known as the Nationally Determined Contribution, this is to get money. The new National Action Plan that 195 countries have to buy into. COP29, COP30 wants their money. COP31 wants it again. And the progress on the finance pledges made at Conference of Parties 29. The pledges, the so-called Memorandum of Understandings, without the consensus of the countries, you rob the taxpayers of each of these countries, and then you can't carry out your assertions. You build a bigger grid to control the entire planet each time. You expand like a weapon against humanity. Valerie Hickey, Global Director for Climate Change at the World Bank. The World Bank, which is UN. All by UN people. High hopes for Conference of Parties, but why do some believe the summit is failing? Well, it's never done nothing in 30 years. Where's his accomplishments again? Welcome to Conference of Parties 30. Ho ho! Yeah, where you're not allowed to talk to the delegates. Thousands of delegates, campaigners, journalists, industrial figures are gathering campaigners. That's the pro-community. Mostly pro-nuclear. They're bizarrely pro-nuclear. It's a pro-nuclear cult gathering is what it really is. Furious Brazil cuts down 100,000 trees in the Amazon to build a road. And so this story's been boxing around for quite a while. I decided I was going to go down that road. It's my own morbid curiosity. A new motorway slicing through tens of thousands of acres of trees was built to welcome more than 50,000 people. Well, that sounds nutty. No, wherever United Nations goes, they spend money like crazy. They buy off everybody and all the kickbacks, right? That's what they're up to. Get everybody on the ticket book, got them already for taking bribes and corruption. And so now they can blackmail them down the road. And they'll put them in key positions of authority down the road if they're players. Drone footage published by the BBC in March revealed how a thick thoroughfare has been cut into the Amazon. Why did it take until the BBC posted something? Does anybody really believe the local communities didn't find drones and do the same thing? Construction work on the highway in February, right alongside that Amazon River. They ripped the hell out of the rainforest of Brazil to build a 4-lane highway for the environmentalists to travel. No, for UN to travel, not environmentalists. It's a big scandal. Yeah, it's a bigger scandal that time. Canadian climate activist. He's a fucking weirdo, if you ask me. I looked at him. Brazil's Lulu. Can you imagine how corrupt he is? You have any idea how corrupt that guy actually is? He insists that the road is designed with features like wildlife crossings, bicycle lanes, and solar power streetlights, data. The city's also seeing hotels. This is standard everywhere they go. A revamped port for cruise ships, major upgrades ahead of the events. This is how they buy their way into the local governments, local, state, and federal governments. Brazil's federal government is reportedly spending more than $81 million to double the airport capacity from 7 to 14 million passengers. Well, why do you need to do that? Because you take it over, right? So I was looking, it took quite a while before I finally started finding the roads. Acres of road land needed to build a 4-lane highway. And so then I started finding some of the documentation. I was like, that was a big project. Holy shit. They went all in. So they built all these other things that they're building all this other infrastructure in the middle of nowhere. Sustainable development. Everything the United Nations does is the most resource-intensive on human history, but they control all the media, all the universities, all the local, state, federal governments by the looks of it. And they come in, they just ingratiate themselves with $1 billion and they walk out with $10 billion. Whereas here, come on, Lulu, you got to do that for us. Well, you know, the taxpayers, they might get cranky. Well, here's another $100 million. There's cash. Here, like, hey, bring in that suitcases. Lulu's, you got to have a few more suitcases. I got to pay off a lot of people. And, well, how much do you need, Lulu? We're going to need $500 million. Cash? Okay. We'll get them to print it all up for you. You fly it in on 737s on pallets, like they did in Iraq. That was crazy, what they done in Iraq. Where planes were coming in with pallets of money, and the bundles were the size of a football. And then they would get orders to take a truck, had no registration in it. It was probably a stolen truck or something, or painted. And they were ordered to bring a truckload of money to this destination and get out and walk away. Don't look back. That went on over and over and over. I can't remember the number. Something like $6 trillion was printed and shipped there on 4, 5, 6 flights a day of planes. All they carry is pallets of money. If you're the pilot on that plane and you took a $100,000 bundle or 2 or 3 or 10 or 20, No one would blink an eye because they were throwing it away when they got there. They were literally just dumping it here and dumping it there to create an opposition, right? It was insane that the final truth came out. So they're building all kinds of infrastructure. That's why they got the 8-mile highway. So when they fly out of there in their private jets, because United Nations is not going to be cheap, traveling cheap. So if you ain't cut down, well, it was more than 100,000 trees, I can tell you that much. And they built an 8-mile double-lane highway on each side for 50,000 guests. No, that was for that. Yeah, it looks that way, but it's about putting the infrastructure there for their takeover of Brazil's natural resources. Because the United Nations is only interested in your oil, particularly your water and your fresh water. They're obsessed with that. And your minerals, they're absolutely obsessed with that. And so when I seen these pictures, I was like, oh, finally, and you won't believe how hard it was to find that pictures. Last night, I was like, this is ridiculous. Gonna make me work? I got other shit I gotta get done. And so when I seen these pictures, to bring in 50,000 delegates, 50,000 the delegates are the chicken necks that are selling out countries. Bought and paid for politicians, right? They're there to find out what the United Nations wants them to do so they can get their kickbacks. It's a big Ponzi scheme, and you're not in it. Japan is working to speed up the decommissioning of the Fukushima Daiichi reactors. 2013. I'll tell you just 1 second. So you had 4 reactors this is on the 15th of March, day 4. Now, 2013, they claimed they had all the tanks were full of water, and TEPCO had no control over that site. Just hang with me. I might have to justify it.
We understand that this water discharge is beyond our control, and we do not think the current situation is good.
This is 2013. TEPCO saying they got no control over the water whatsoever. Nothing. 4 nuclear meltdown buildings.
Fukushima plant sits smack in the middle of an underground aquifer. Deep beneath the ground, the site is rapidly being overwhelmed by water.
So one of the biggest aquifers in that part of the country is overwhelmed with radioactive emissions from the multiple nuclear meltdowns. This is 2013. Same video.
Beneath the surface, water flows downhill and into the basement of the damaged reactor buildings. There it is contaminated with high levels of radiation. To stop the groundwater flowing on into the nearby ocean, engineers are building an underground barrier. But that is causing the groundwater level to rapidly rise.
Doesn't work.
It's now so high the water will soon reach the surface. Then it will start flowing overground into the sea. This week, the company that owns Fukushima, TEPCO, made this disturbing admission.
We understand that this water discharge is beyond our control, and we do not think the current situation is good.
And so they're pumping all the water up, and they filled up all the tanks. In 2013, 1,000 tanks. They have no control over it. And so the United Nations, who owns the media, had journalists claiming in 2013...
is on top of what used to be reactor building number 4.
So they got, this is just a few of the medias that done it, claiming they were on top of the building to your left, 150 feet above it. That's supposed to be reactor 4, right? Well, I mean, you lost the inventories in just the first 4 days. The aquifers underneath it were so radioactive. These reactors detonated and lost, ejected their reactor cores, some of them right out of their buildings. And the typical plume model consensus was, this model was 23 days of radioactive fallout of cesium-137 covering the planet. This is the French government, this one. And this was not a projection, but a spike in North America of 1 million to 10 million atoms. So this actually happened to us. And so all the species in the forest are getting full body x-rays, and we slowly sterilize them now since, well, for 80 years we've been doing it, but now Fukushima was a pulse event. So the thing with Fukushima reactors is each building had decades of reactor cores at the top of the buildings, and what's known as fuel pools. And they've lost them. So you're talking about 36 reactor cores counting the running reactor cores. No, I say 9 reactor cores per building. And the average 5.5, 5 3/4 reactor cores a decade is what ends up in the fuel pool. So these are pure uranium, pure plutonium, except for that one. That's a plutonium mixed oxide reactor. They're breeder reactors for weapons and for fuel. And so their emissions, the emissions from a normal fuel pool at every reactor on the planet with no containment, it's into your local environment, you're typically surrounded by farms, is 2 billion times more toxic than industrial poison by the atom. And you can put 200 million atoms on the head of a needle, you can't see it. But one of those atoms in a human or a bird or a mammal or animal, it's in there pulsing energy at the speed of light every second. Carbon doesn't do that. Carbon means more muscles, more hair, blah, 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 right? Carbon's good. Carbon knows make plumes that covers the whole planet. We lost 36 reactor cores. The report detailed the fact that the actual workers themselves were being paid only $11 US per day for their efforts. $11. When it was all said and done, right? Now, TEPCO allocated $1,000 for each employee per day. Each employee is supposed to get $1,000 per day. So, if this was nuclear scientists, then I don't know how you can live. But then again, if the nuclear scientists, what the frig are you doing at a nuclear meltdown? You know better. So this is actually the homeless and the destitute and the victims of society, the immigrants who don't speak the language. In Fukushima City, over 90,000 homes are eligible for decontamination. And so far 4,000 have been cleaned. You can't clean a house from radioactive fallout. It doesn't work that way. So what they're saying is every house and business and structure in Fukushima City, which is a population of 296,000, they had 229,000 counts per minute of cesium-137 per square meter. These are absurd numbers. And you can't just have cesium-137. For every cesium-137, there's typically 100 more strontium-90 produced. It's 70 strontium-85, and an endless amount of other isotopes. These are nuclear wastelands that should be abandoned. And so what they're doing is power washing the houses, spreading the radiation even worse everywhere, and then saying it's decontaminated because they're only getting $11 per day. And they don't know anything about what radiation is. It means nothing to them. All they know is they're slaves, and they pay $11 a day. All right, so these slaves is this story here. Fukushima workers risk radiation to feed the families. These so-called workers at the J Village, where currently they have the Deaf Olympics, where there's 3,000 athletes and who knows how many people. 3,000 athletes, very healthy people, brought into a known nuclear wasteland within, it'll tell us coming up how far they are from the actual nuclear plants. It doesn't matter if you're in Japan, let alone Fukushima, prefecture. You're the brutal nuclear wastelands I showed you earlier. Okay, here we go. Spiegel, which is I believe they're German media, alleged media, visited J Village, which is strictly off limits. It's off limits. And it's a nuclear wasteland. This is an incredible story we're going to go through right now. A total of 20 officers guard this intersection day and night. To the right of the roadblock, the highway leads to J Village, a former training center for the Japanese national soccer team. It's an incredible story. Since March 11th, Japan's largest soccer complex has been transformed into the base camp for Japan's peculiar heroes. The workers who are trying to regain control of the crippled Fukushima Daiichi nuclear power plant. Well, bless their hearts. So there's a few problems with this story immediately that stands out to, I'm pretty sure, everybody who's here. Regularly will know exactly what I'm talking about. Oh, I should smurfed up. Hang on here. Let me do that again. It's always madness when you try to tell these stories. And if you want to be, like, there's 4 nuclear meltdowns in a row all alongside of each other. But here's a picture of reactor 3 and 4 going to show up at some point. This is the ocean side where I'm pointing. So this is the turbine building right here. That's what's known as Medusa, and that's Medusa's big brother. This is a plutonium mixed oxide reactor. This shouldn't exist, these types of reactors. And you can see that cooked off. It's hard to appreciate these buildings are 190-foot buildings, that they're 19-story, 65-meter buildings. They're built to take a big explosion like this, by the way. More than 1,000 of these workers prepare themselves for their shifts here day after day. This is J Village, where they're currently having the Deaf Olympics. This was September the 21st, 2011. So March, April, May, June, July, August, September. 7 months later. Nuclear meltdowns are forever, by the way. Only buses and vans with a TEPCO authorization, which is not a non-decommissioned entity, and you just watched a video of them asserting that they have no control over the water or the site whatsoever, nothing. And they're left in charge, so you blame TEPCO instead of the nuclear industry, which is who didn't go there and who should be there. So they shuttle the workers to the reactors and back to J Village. Well, you can't work at these reactors. And because it's I made a little video out of it for the explosion. It doesn't. Like, you can't work there. You can't. Your organs will melt right away. You can't actually work there. We'd like for nuclear scientists to be there and explain it to us, but they don't want to die, so they won't go there. They said F off and die, basically, to anybody that suggests. The white protective suits are made of paper. Synthetic paper, which is even worse, are made out of paper. Forget the synthetic, that's there to confuse you. So you need 6 feet of lead, basically, to protect you from gammas, neutrons, betas, and alpha radioactive fallout. But if you go to an actual nuclear meltdown where it's the worst fallout, the worst gamma shine, neutron bombardment, beta rays, alpha shines on the entire planet, here's your paper suit. They alleged once there that they burned 7,000 paper suits a day. Hardly anybody speaks. Isn't that an interesting statement? Hardly anyone speaks. So you got it's actually around 3,000 of them here. They work at a nuclear meltdown, and they can only work 1 hour a day because of the regulations. They're supposed to get $1,000 a day. If you're making $1,000 every day, right, when you chip up a little bit, like, hey, George, how you doing, man? That's good. I see you still alive. Stay away from those tanks. Others ripped off their suits with both hands. That's supposed to shield you from radiation at a nuclear meltdown, is it? As if every tenth of a second counts. So when they're ripping they're ripping a paper suit off their body. They're not trying to unbutton it, just tear it off, just walk away from it. They couldn't care less. They're making $11 a day, right? It should be $1,000 a day. They're located. TEPCO locates $1,000 per employee. So if you had a union site, you would walk out there with $1,000 each day. So a lot of people would risk their lives for $1,000 a day. As if every tenth of a second counts before they finally remove the hot and sweaty suits from their bodies. Well, the suits are not sweaty. The clothes underneath it are. It was summertime or something, I guess. It was September. It was still warm there. Then they stand in line for radiation checks. Wait, what? This is crazy what I'm about to show you here. Those who have to spend particularly long periods in the oppressive heat and humidity / nuclear wasteland. No, oppressive heat and humidity. Yeah, but it's a nuclear wasteland. Yeah, but it's hot, Dan, and it's humid, so. Total disconnection on purpose, right? That's what they're doing with that story. So this is not just, I'm not saying it's not hot there. I'm not saying that. I am saying, though, that do you see a whole bunch of people working there? No, because your organs melt, right? So what were 3,000 people doing at a nuclear meltdown, I wonder? I can't figure it out for the life of me. And if I can't figure it out, then that's pretty sketchy. Under their protective suits. Oh, you mean suits made of paper? No, Dana, the protective suits. Yeah, the suits made of paper, right? What an insult to call a paper suit. Like this same paper suit you buy at the dollar shop so you can paint your garage or one of your rooms or something. Throw it away. In August alone, 13 were admitted to the emergency room set up in front of reactor 5 and 6. Just what the frig are you talking about, man? Like, why ain't you on the easterly side of that site? Far away from the reactors. A 60-year-old worker died in May, presumably of a heart attack. March, April, May. Presumably of a heart attack. Why, because he's 60? Or because he's... There's a huge amount of people dying of heart attacks throughout Japan. In fact, the death rates might give the creeps to some people. I've been itching to tell this story since yesterday. A team of workers / homeless who have been quickly trained to use in radiation levels. This is scary. Wait, are you coming back from a nuclear meltdown? You're in J Village, where there's currently tens of thousands of people every day and 3,000 athletes. The evidence is overwhelming, what I'm going to show you. Who have been quickly trained in radiation levels. So they're going to be the radiation experts. A team of workers / homeless who were thrown into the fire, right? Here's a guy, can I go over there and read out the numbers? Okay, boss. I get my $11 today? Yep, you will so, George. Checks each man's exposure. Okay, that's interesting. A team of workers. Not scientists, not academics, not nuclear. Like if they were from a university, it'd be a university. If it was from a company, it'd be a company. Like if it was Jacobs or if it was Bechtel or if it was... Who have been quickly trained in radiation levels, checks each man's radiation exposure. So they're using gamma, cheap, dirty, stupid, useless, because you're talking about huge doses these people are bringing back with them. The inspectors are wearing protective, paper suits and paper mask. Paper inspectors, if they're like actually educated, they're not going there in a paper suit and a paper mask. If they know anything about radiation, you couldn't drag them there. They'd claw your eyes there. They were screeching, no! Folding tables have been set up. Folding tables have been set up with 4 mobile Geiger counters. 4 mobile Geiger counters. And next to that, for 1,000 of the workers, 4 Geiger counters for 1,000 workers. And next to these are 3 permanently installed radiometers. But they're at the end of a gym, right? They're under a basketball net. You got any idea how crazy this story actually is? How wacky, lunatic this story actually is? 3 permanently installed radiometers. You don't hear that very often. Under the basketball hoop at the end of each of the gyms. So you thought I made it up, didn't you? You'd like, Dana made that up. They'll chop that out and say I did anyway at some point. Somebody got a collection of it out there. I got to get Durnford chip, boy. Under the basketball hoop at the end of the gym is a folding tables with 4 mobile, Geiger counters, mobile. It gets worse, way worse. The inspectors in their paper suits and their paper mask at a major nuclear event in a major nuclear wasteland, which they actually talk about this coming up, how big of a wasteland J Village actually is. The inspectors are holding bulky instruments and gazing at the gauges like, hey, I know what the frig this is. I don't even speak Japanese. They move the sensors first over the head of each worker, then left and right along the arms. And this is how they're going to quantify radiation exposure from gamma shine, neutron bombardments, is it? The chest, the abdomen. Once these Geiger counters hit a big note, you have to send them back to the factory to be recalibrated, or even to see if they're usable again. It might be too hot to use ever again. They are. If you're in a nuclear wasteland with Geiger counters, you walk away from those things. If you're the unlucky enough to be put in one of them in your... They move the sensors first over the head of each worker and left to right along the arms, the chest, stomach, the legs. And during the check, the workers stand on a mat with an adhesive film designed to capture radioactive particles. So they're using them for human guinea pigs, blatant. Some university set this up to study the lab rats, right? Many of these men are young and look as if they are in their early 20s and homeless. Temporary workers doing the dirty work. So I shouldn't complain because at least we got some information about the horror, what they've done to these poor victims. On busy days, he says, more than 3,000 workers pass through the radiation detection station. So 4 people untrained, trained, with 4 Geiger counters are checking thousands of people, are they? That's just cruel, man. That's so evil. It's evil on a level that I've rarely encountered. Under the basketball hoop at the end of the gym, folding tables have been set up with 4 mobile, Geiger counters. Well, that Geiger counter up in the corner up there, that's mobile. The inspector. On a busy day, he said more than 3,000 workers passed through the detection stations under the hoop in the gym, right? Every day, a brigade is deployed to the Fukushima Daiichi nuclear disease plant in an attempt to bring the stricken reactors under control. Like you can't bring something. They lost their inventories in the first 5 days. This is 7 months later on top of that. And you're talking about a severe nuclear wasteland. Doomsday-like radiation released fire in the pool at Unit 4. Well, the pool was 150 feet above the stump there. So what's the possibility, because it doesn't exist anymore, it was a fire there, I wonder? It would be a global catastrophe. It already has been, but it would dwarf what has already happened, nuclear waste expert. That's what Arnie Gunnarsson used to say too, right? That's probably who they're quoting. In an attempt to bring the stricken reactors under control. Nuclear meltdowns are different than a burned building or a broken machine. These are, you don't go in proximity because your organs melt and deliquefy. So, like reactor 1 and reactor 3, this is decades of reactor cores you're looking at, and this is turned into particulates. The fuel is. There's around 9 reactor cores, and these are enormous reactor cores each, and basically pure uranium, plutonium, zirconium, which is incredibly radioactive because of its proximity to the chain reaction, right? So just to give you context, reactor 1, you don't walk wherever that plume is, and that plume will expand constantly because each particle is still splitting atoms for millions of years. Right? And by the way, the biggest byproduct of the irradiated fuel rods is curium isotopes. Curium isotopes need lead shielding 20 times thicker than you do for the plutonium isotopes. So this is, well, it was reactor 4. And you'll never see this picture anywhere else. That's 4 sides of reactor 4. And that's a model of each of these buildings. They're exactly identical. United States have 70 identical reactors. Should Conference of Parties 30 hold Conference of Parties 31 at Fukushima, Daiichi, nuclear meltdown site I just showed you, and eat only the local food? They picked up 30 million one-ton bags, but they never stopped growing the food there. And drink water from nuclear tanks. Because they're saying that nothing got out of those buildings. So nothing got out of that building, nothing got out of these 2 buildings, nothing got out of reactor 2. That's the official statement, the official story. And the media's out there regurgitating that narrative, right? Everywhere, that nothing got out of these buildings. So the fuel pools are at the very top of the building, those 2 depictions up there. And this is the reactor core, that's at the top of the building also. And you can see the destruction of the building to your left, I hope. And so, it's so hard for me. Like, I made these videos probably 12 years ago, 11, 12 years ago. 12 years ago. It's most of them. This is CNN saying they're in the reactor fuel pool on the top of the building to your left. The picture
We are here inside Reactor 4 at the Fukushima Daiichi nuclear power plant that was severely crippled during the earthquake and tsunami of 2011, leading to the country's worst nuclear disaster.
Well, this industry is an incredible genocide industry. Let me just... There's a bizarre story. I don't cover it enough, but let me cover it tonight for you. So when you go to the hospital and you're going to get an X-ray, or your child, or your loved ones, or yourself, lead aprons often offer little protection during X-rays. No, it's not little. It's no protection. It makes it worse because one of the downsides is the shielding obscured the imaging field, leading to an unusable X-ray or CAT scan, requiring the patient to have another. That increases his or her radioactive exposures. One study found that the shield was misplaced half the time during pelvic X-rays and often obscured the important bony landmarks. And so the problem with it was it has negative consequences. And so what happens is the X-ray machine adjusts itself and gives you a massive dose to get through the lead shielding to get its X-ray. And so the poor victims who are wearing that are getting 8, 10, 12, 14 times the dose you would have got with a normal brutal X-ray. And you can do these X-rays with lights and computer software. It could have been done 30 years ago, and it probably is for a lot of people who are in the know. But you don't have to use X-rays because you have lights now, right? And you have algorithms with computer programs that can give you a much better, much cleaner, much more useful data than the the incredibly destructive X-ray does. Not as helpful as you once thought it was. Requiring the patient to get even bigger dose. If the machine senses a shield, it increases the dose in an effort to image through the shield, leading to an increase in radiation exposures. If that's and they use that shield constantly on people in the hospitals because they felt that was protecting the people, right? In an attempt to bring the stricken reactor under control, let's go back to that story. 3,000 workers a day passed through the radiation detecting. So they work in Thailand, sweating heat and dangerous high radiation levels. Well, dangerous high levels exist all over the world now because of Japan. But I mean, they're growing food in the nuclear wasteland right alongside of 1-ton bags of radioactive fallout within sight of a nuclear meltdown in a village you're not even allowed to be. This industry is insane. There's no... The maximum annual dose for works in Japan's nuclear power plants is normally 50 millisieverts, 50,000 microsieverts, after consulting with the authority. Most of the employees at a nuclear plant don't need a high school education, or only need a high school education, rather, and preferably, because they can convince them of these laws. Like a nuclear operator is typically trained on the job, and all he needs is a high school education. Same as the security guards at these nuclear sites, because you don't want a smart security guard at a nuclear site. That's for sure. TEPCO has decided to raise the maximum allowable dose to 250 millisieverts, 250,000 microsieverts. Well, TEPCO doesn't have the authority to hurt people. But the problem is, it's not illegal to poison you with radiation. So these are decisions that the Nuclear Regulatory Commission should be making, but because they're so corrupt, they're going to do it. But here they are, they got a company known as TEPCO, which is not a decommissioned authority. They don't build reactors, they don't repair reactors, they are administration only. And so the reason they were left on the job is because you can blame them, which is a corporate personhood, so nobody can go to jail. There's no accountability, right? And you can be evil. And that's part of the manual for corporate personhood is if evil makes you a bigger profit, then let's get evil. High enough to significantly increase the likelihood of developing cancer. So the doses they're getting there in just one day are brutal. But if you're there all the time, I mean, there's 865,000 extra cancers in the first year. Not everybody got healthcare. Not everybody was diagnosed. Some 18,000 workers helped manage the disaster since March 11. Most of them are not employed by TEPCO, but by subcontractors, who in turn recruit their workers from temporarily employment agencies, temp workers, not nuclear academics, nuclear students, like they have 56 reactors there, but they could employ people from the other nuclear power plants across the country, right? They don't. Before the tsunami, many of the workers had already done their fair share of the dirty work at other nuclear plants. We talk about this a lot, right? The nuclear gypsies. Most of them are not doing this to save Japan, but to feed families. As a young man, he helped with a major overhaul at other power plants. Tell me this guy. Each morning he dons his paper suit and his mask in J Village and makes a second stop beyond the plant's gates. He dons his paper suit, the white protective suit made of paper. Here he has to put on a lead vest. So he can put on a lead vest over a paper suit. These are monsters, what they're doing to people, what they've done to people. To me, this is one of the craziest stories I've ever had the unfortunate. Let me just get rid of everything we covered again. It's such complicated. Like if we try to challenge the news, the laws every day, you can't keep up with it. He has to put on a lead vest. So he's got another paper suit to put over, thank goodness. A lead vest can't protect you at a nuclear meltdown. A mask that covers his entire face from gamma shine, neutron bombardment, beta rays, alpha shine, stuff like that. Really. And 3 different pairs of gloves, one on top of the other. Okay, you got your paper suit on? Yeah, okay, you're safe. The entire nuclear core ejected into the environment, reactor 3. Cover up of reactor 3 fueled with plutonium, the plutonium mixed oxide reactor. It suggested a steam explosion. Well, it was, we've studied this a long time, right? The explosions were caused not by hydrogen, even though that played a factor after the fact. The explosion is from pressure. So the reactors are already running at over 1,000 pounds per square inch. So they need 1 million gallons a minute of water, 1,440 minutes a day. So 1 million gallons is 4,500 tons. So if you want to think of that number, think of 4,500 one-ton pickup trucks. So over 24 hours, 6,450,000 one-ton pickup trucks has to go through each of the reactors, not all together, but each single reactor needs 6,450,000 one-ton pickup trucks of water in 24 hours. So how much energy do you need to do that? So each nuclear site is dependent upon 2 gas, oil, or coal plants dedicated to them, or more, that are dedicated to these sites. Because you can imagine 6 reactors that need 36 million one-ton pickup trucks of water with 1,000 liters each in 24 hours. That's 6 rows of one-ton pickup trucks wrapped around the entire planet in 24 hours. So you're talking about some serious energy to move that kind of water. And that water now will turn turbines to power 1 million homes and businesses. So if you took the 2 gas, oil, and coal plants to turn the same turbines, you don't need nuclear. Because nuclear is not doing that. The gas, oil, and coal plants are. Nuclear is about the fuel cycle. In the fuel cycle, once you take the reactor core out, you're putting it into a fuel pool. We're still splitting atoms for millions of homes and businesses, except there's no containment. So eventually you'll suffocate all the life on the planet through an element that we have no autoimmune trigger to defend against. After which the buses head off to the reactor. Sasaki is only allowed to work 1 hour per day, or at most 90 minutes. Otherwise, he will receive an excessively high dose of radiation. Like if you're in a nuclear wasteland, you're not getting out of there without a high dose of radiation. If you're working there every day, you're not picking up your last check, let's put it that way. Then he heads back to J Village, where there's currently the Deaf Olympics for 2025. And onto his boarding house in Iwaki, Yamato, where he shares a room with 3 men. Yeah, because he needs money, which is just under 1,000 euros, I think it is, a day. He has his own worries. But he will only be able to do the job a few more weeks until he reaches his company's radiation limits. No, until he got to throw him away because they're worried he's going to drop dead on site. TEPCO is preparing to spend decades in J Village. Stadium clock has stopped at 2 o'clock and 46 p.m., 2:46 p.m., which was the moment when the earthquake cut off electricity at the power plant 20 kilometers away, 12 miles away. So we're within 12 miles of a massive, the world's biggest nuclear event in human history by many orders of magnitudes. There's 36 reactor cores lost. In one room, the workers can pick up bento boxes, which strikes fear into my soul every time I hear those words. Next door, TEPCO had built a laundromat with more than 100 washing machines. So you got washing machines washing radioactive clothing. You got any idea how the bioaccumulation works? You'll hear people in the future say, yeah, I remember when I was a young man, we were working at the Fukushima Daiichi, and the washing machines were so radioactive, if you stood alongside them for 30 minutes, your organs would melt. Next door, TEPCO built a laundromat. Which they probably charged them. More than 100 washing machines. So, On a busy day, more than 3,000 workers passed through the radiation detection station. So you had 100 washing machines for 3,000 people, did you? For paper suits? A team of workers, can you imagine how radioactive those washing machines actually are? My goodness. How the dryers are? A team of workers who have been quickly trained in radiation levels check each man's exposure. Let me do it again. Who was quickly trained in radiation levels, check each man's exposure. So this is the least sensible thing you could do, right? With 4 mobile Geiger counters, 3,000 people. Like that is frightening. It's a crazy story. I've never seen anything like this one. Under the baseball hoop at the end of the gym, folding tables have been set up with 4 mobile Geiger counters. Next door, TEPCO has built a laundromat with 100 washing machines. Wait, no, I was going through the story sometime. In the courtyard of the main building, TEPCO has a small store built where workers in the most dangerous place on Earth can purchase cigarettes and tea. So they know they're broke ass, right? And of course, now they're blaming any cancers on the people that worked there on their cigarette addictions. Where workers, why weren't you giving away the cigarettes? Why didn't you give them a carton of cigarettes a week, man? They're at nuclear meltdowns, for goodness sakes. You're throwing money away, not like we've never seen before. You're stealing it. TEPCO has, I just can't even wrap my mind around, has a small store built where workers can purchase their smokes and their tea. Where every worker finds out what he's doing. They're paid 100, is that euros? I can't remember, francs or TEPCO has a small store. Hang on. Some of them still wearing their work overalls. This is the most radioactive stuff imaginable for clothing. Have gathered around a number of ashtrays and are smoking in silence. Again, that connotation, right? Nobody talks. And exhausted workers sleep on the floor in the hallway. Can you imagine how radioactive the floors are? Because they're all coming back and walking in the same hallways. And you know that the whole story is absurd. But here it is. Now, a man in a TEPCO uniform stands here and uses a red felt pen to post the current radiation levels for over a dozen different places at J Village. That is so frightening. Let me delete that. The story that never stops. Now, a man in a TEPCO uniform stands there with a red felt pen posting radiation levels, current, for over a dozen different places. Stay away from over there. We lost 2 guys this morning. 3 TEPCO employees are sitting nearby with their laptops, and the workers hand them their daily dosimeters. 3 university students from Oak Ridge National Laboratory, probably. In return, they are given a receipt and a bubble gum that resembles a cash register sales slip and shows the dose of radiation they received that day. Yeah, get out of here. I'm talking back to me. I have the guy in the tattoos sort you out. Stacks of contaminated suits. Well, 3,000 suits a day, at least. Like TEPCO, right, actually came out and said they were incinerating 7,000 paper suits a day. That's why they don't have, like this, you can't destroy radiation by incinerating it, by the way. You just release it back into the environment in the most harmful form. They make $100 a day. Outside on the covered playing field, 8 goalposts have been pushed aside or nestled together. Workers' underwear have been hung out to dry on one of the crossbars. Does that sound like nuclear scientists to you? At the entrance, someone has used pink tape to attach a sign to the bare concrete. Caution, contaminated material. Don't cross the street. There's a lethal dose over right there. Like, that's what Kuma and Footabar is like. 80% of the town is lethal doses, which means the town is a lethal dose, right? Behind the sign, use protective suits, paper suits, and masks are stacked in piles 4 to 5 meters high. This is just madness. Just my heart's broken for the victims. 3 shifts around the clock of the homeless and the destitute and the victims of society at $100 a day. He stooped over a man in a white and blue uniform, leads the way to the far corner, where radioactive dirt is lying in a kind of rubber pool. The man says the dirt was washed off cars that have been close to the reactors. And that's accessible to everybody? People just walking by this stuff? Nearby, somebody had taped markers to the artificial turf, much like the ones that runners use to gauge their run-ups. Here, however, workers have written radiation levels on the tape. With every meter that you approach the pool, the radiation levels increases. Jeez. 1 meter away, 20 microsieverts. Well, they're using gamma. They're not looking for betas or alphas or neutrons or X-rays, right? And those things would have been broken the first time they were exposed to high-level radiation, which was day one. Just trying to get to the site would have been exposed. The men from the radiation detection team brings new full bags of refuge from the gym out to the field every few minutes. The work here is less dangerous than at the reactors. Just wrap your mind around that statement. The bottom sentence. The work here at J Village is less dangerous than at the nuclear meltdowns. Not by much, but you got everybody who don't know what they're doing bringing radiation back to the village over and over. And we're talking thousands every week. Holy smokeroos, buddy. That is just wild. Should Conference of Parties 30 hold Conference of Parties 31 at the Fukushima Daiichi, eat only the local food and drink the water from the nuclear tank? That's why, this story tonight is why the poll was the way. Now, I posted that last night, which is unusual for me. But that's how antsy I was over this story. The men from the radiation detection team brings new bags full of refuge from the gym out onto the field every few minutes. The men from the radiation detection team bring bags full of radiation from the gym out onto the field every few minutes. There's 1,440 minutes in a day. The work here at the village is less dangerous than at the nuclear meltdown, at the reactor. That's an interesting way to frame that. It should be the nuclear meltdown site, right? It should be the nuclear wasteland, that's where they're doing, nuclear wasteland on top of that. The work here at J Village is less dangerous than at the reactor. Man, that is the craziest statement you can imagine. Imagine how demented you were to frame it that way. This is another farmer growing food. The work there is less dangerous than at the reactor, but it kills more people because people eat the radioactive food, get sick, and die later. There are two types of jobs in Kyoto. Either you work in J Village for many hours with less radiation, still a nuclear wasteland, or at the Daiichi nuclear meltdown for fewer hours, but the radiation levels that are 10 to 100 times higher. So how, like you're talking about 36 nuclear reactors melting down. I don't know if you can get higher radiation than that. Which means J Village was brutal radiation. There are basically hardly any other jobs in the village where he comes from, which is located near the power plant. He was working at a plant somewhere else, and he escaped. A few weeks later, he said he received the order to come to J Village, an order, whether I wanted to or not. But he says he also felt a sense of responsibility because the plant had brought so many jobs to the region. I've heard that narrative before, and I've never heard anybody say something like that before, but only in the Japanese context of nuclear meltdowns. The members of the radiation detection team, the members, the homeless in the paper suits with quick training how to use 4 Geiger counters with 3,000 people, are working 3 shifts around the clock. He has often seen workers at their limits, not only physically but mentally. Yeah, I can't imagine. Most jobs are simple, dirty work, he says, according to Akimoto. Many of his co-workers who work for subcontractors had no choice but to come here. If they refuse, where will they get another job? So we're not talking about nuclear scientists, nuclear academics, nuclear employees. We're talking about the homeless and the destitute and the victims of society, immigrants who don't speak the language. We're talking about the most unaware people on the planet working at a nuclear meltdown site. Right, the most uninformed people on the entire planet. Many of his co-workers who work for subcontractors had no choice but to come here. If they refuse, where will they ever get another job? I don't know anyone who's doing this for Japan. Most of them need the money. Whenever possible, highly qualified workers are only exposed to comparatively low levels of radiation. After all, they'll be needed later. Whenever possible. A move to raise radiation threshold. So NISA warned that there will soon be a lack of technicians because too many have exceeded radiation. So as early as next year, NISA anticipated there will be a shortage of over 1,000 qualified workers, which will severely affect the work at the Fukushima plant, which is going to go on for thousands of years. The Nuclear Safety Agency solution. Oh, well. If a homeless person hasn't got a house, I can hear them when they were young, like, Mommy, if a homeless person doesn't have a house, why don't they just buy one? And their mommy's like, oh, you're so special, I'm going to take you out for lobster and steak. It recommends raising the limits to allow workers, McDonald's. It recommends raising the limits to allow workers to be exposed within a few years significantly greater amounts of radiation than before, because it's not illegal to kill you with radiation. There is no law against it. Right? Congress and parliaments don't have the authority to make it illegal. By mid-August, 17,561 men had registered at the health ministry as radiation workers. There are plans to monitor health forever and ever and ever, like they did when they rebuilt Nagasaki, Hiroshima in the nuclear wasteland. Why would you build your cities on a nuclear wasteland for? Oh, because evil is not easy being evil, Dana. We're special. So there was 17,561 men were registered, but 16,000 of them quit their job, right? Because it's a nuclear wasteland they weren't told about. 6 of them have been exposed to radiation levels exceeding high limits. Like you're at a nuclear meltdown where nuclear fuel fell all over the site. Saying you're only getting 250 millisieverts is absurd. 400 people were exceeding the 50 millisievert. How can you go to a nuclear meltdown site multiple reactors and fuel pools melting down, and say you only got 50 millisieverts. TEPCO, send us people who don't mind dying. Oh, that's how that's done. Why was TEPCO left in charge? Why did they build a reactor 70 kilometers from the tectonic plates, which is building it on the tectonic plates? Despite months of searching, the company can no longer locate 88 workers who were employed. Well, they were found in urns. They were incinerated. The company had merely handed out badges to contractors without meeting the workers in person. Workers ID'd with barcodes and photos have only recently been introduced. You know what happens to the first? So earning $100 per day. Now TEPCO had budgeted $1,000 per person per day to pay the workers. But unskilled workers, he said, often received only about $100 of that money. So where did the rest of the money go? So they were supposed to get the unskilled worker, you know, the homeless and destitute and victims of society, the immigrants who don't speak the language. Where did they go? All right, what happened to them? That's the craziest statement imaginable, isn't it? When they reach the radiation limit, he added, they lose their job and employment agency finds a replacement, you know, another homeless person. Next door is the laundromat. Every night in his boarding house room, he calculates his current level of radiation exposures. They don't have a clue what it is, right? They're going on, you know, what's his name? Robert. Just hang on, I'll find a video of him. He does a better job of telling. So they have doctors come in and consult with the homeless and the destitute at J Village, right? Well, I got one of them doctors here. I want you to hear him now. He radiates people. He'll explain it later on in this short little clip. The guy's actually just a whack job. Robert Gale. He's an MD, PhD. Imperial College of London. That should just terrify you automatically. I should oh crap, that's a real life monster. These are, when you hear me talking about these chicken necks with multiple degrees, there's nothing they won't do to make somebody talk to them. This is an incredible video, and he's talking about the doses to people at J Village, how he told them it was like eating peanut butter or 50 minutes in a kayak, and this is where the people who are working in the nuclear wasteland that are supposed to be getting $1,000 a day are actually only getting $100. He's probably getting a chunk of that pie when he showed up. Very telling.
And then the final slide will just show you.
I'm sorry. That should never have happened. I'll adjust it here on my end. I got no excuses, and I apologize.
Where on that thermometer does something like Fukushima?
Let me start this again.
And then the final slide will just show you, where on that thermometer does something like Fukushima lie? Now, you'll hear a lot of detailed scientific discussions of our uncertainty.
That's Kathleen Higley in the middle, and Berkeley University's, thank goodness I can't remember his name.
That we shouldn't really be talking about point estimates. We should be talking about ranges. But
he's using smoke detectors. So he's talking, and he'll mention that coming up, to the workers for Fukushima who are concerned.
I think what people want to know, what the public want to know, what I have to deal with, and when I'm in Tokyo, and people ask me, or the workers ask me, what is my risk from getting 50 millisieverts? They want to know really where, I'm sorry, if you can go back. Where am I on that thermometer? They don't care if it's 2 in 10,000 or 4 in 10,000, which is a huge scientific difference. But just where am I on that calendar, on that thermometer? And I think these kinds of expressions, give a better sense to the public, and that's certainly an area where we can improve. And I guess the final slide, I'm sorry, it wasn't the final slide, is just looking at comparable risks of death is another way of trying to express these.
So, this is madness. He says comparable risk of working at Fukushima is like smoking 14 cigarettes, not a day, but over your whole life. Or eating peanut butter, or 20 days in New York, driving 600 kilometers in a car, kayaking for 15 minutes. That's what he's comparing to being at a nuclear meltdown. So the people there are clearly, you can imagine how sadistic he actually is.
Thanks to the public. So getting 1 millisievert of radiation, which is just on the bottom, is equivalent to just smoking just 14 cigarettes, period. Not 14 cigarettes a day, but smoking 14 cigarettes. And you can see some other amusing things like eating 25 cups of peanut butter. Peanut butter has a risk of containing aflatoxin, which is can cause your death or can cause liver cancer. Driving 600 kilometers. So that really helps people quite a bit in understanding where they should place the risk of Fukushima. So I'll stop there and return it to you. Good morning, everyone. I'm Robert Gale. I'm a visiting professor of hematology at the Imperial College in London. And I'm an MD PhD, and I treat people with cancer. And so my background in entering this...
He treats people for cancer. And he told the biggest whopper you can ever imagine about the health effects from radiation. And some people, people that go to him for treatment are murdered. He murders people with radiation.
Is really fundamentally giving, I'm involved very much in transplants, bone marrow transplants.
Bone marrow transplants?
As you may know that we use extraordinarily high doses of radiation.
Extraordinary high doses of radiation to kill every cell in the body and then hope the body accepts the transplant. It never does.
Prepare people for transplants, and that very much simulates the situation that could occur or did occur in Chernobyl and other radiation.
Look at the eyes of them. Like when you meet a serial killer, you can see this hollow look on their face.
Accidents. So my colleagues and I are the people who actually have hands-on experience treating high-dose radiation victims. And in lifetime cancer risk, for example, I said that for a Japanese or American male at the age of 50, it's about 1 in 2, 50%.
Yeah, well, cancer epidemic started in the 70s during all the nuclear wars. I'm sorry, they call it testing, where they blew up the same nuclear weapons with the same radioactive fallout.
Your lifetime cancer risk.
Sadistic.
Is somewhat discouraging. I think several people have said to me in hearing that if I have to get cancer, I hope I get a good one. I hope I get prostate cancer and not lung cancer. But you can make that worse by being a smoker, as you can see from that thermometer.
So smoking is worse than being at a nuclear meltdown is what he's trying to imply, right?
But there are some other things. What do we consider negligible? Where does a CT, probably fit in?
You gotta be just wow. You gotta be from a whole different planet to be that guy. Between 1,000, 2,000 of them live at J Village right now. At that point, this is a hotel owner in the city. There are plans to move many of them soon to new trailers on the playing fields of J Village. The playing fields. Now they always, we read earlier how they were bringing every few minutes they would bring out more radioactive material and throw it in the field. And they're going to build trailers in the nuclear wasteland so the workers couldn't escape. And the workers weren't going to complain because they're in a nuclear wasteland. It's just wow stuff. During the day, this one guy works in front of reactor 4 assembling plastic tubes for decontamination systems. Sometimes, like, I get a little bit upset. It's just because I cover it so much, and I put it all together during the show. And these people claim they're doing
1,500 highly radioactive fuel rods inside this pool. They've got to move them outside of this reactor into a safer location.
So she's saying she's 150 feet above. That's ABC Australia, the biggest media in Australia. Japan working to speed up decommissioning of Fukushima Daiichi reactors. The report detailed sad facts. The actual workers themselves were being paid only $11 in US per day for their efforts when they were supposed to get $1,000. That's some friggin' incredible stuff, isn't it? The nuclear industry has done this all over the world to everybody, and now they contaminated your whole planet, the whole biosphere, 8 million species. Where are we going to draw a line? And don't worry, they're going to cross that line. There's nothing will stop them from crossing that line. They'll have the police beat you out of the way first, but then they'll cross that line. They're a unique threat to humanity and the species. They're the most important threat to humanity. Is not a meteorite or a comet it's the nuclear industry's radioactive fallout from 1,000 fuel pools worldwide, 24 hours a day hemorrhaging into the environment. That's the biggest threat to humanity. Japan will suffer a crushing defeat if it tries to intervene over Taiwan and China. Look at that face on that. Holy freak. That's Japan's new prime minister? What the hell is it? Is it real? Is that a human? That's some creepy looking friggin' shit right there, buddy. She's so pro-nuclear. She eats fuel rods for breakfast. Used, of course. Look at the friggin'... What the hell is wrong with her? Look at the stupid fucking pearl necklace. Japan will suffer a crushing defeat by the Chinese military if it tries to use force to intervene over Taiwan, China's defense ministry said on November 14th. Mr. Takayachi sparks a diplomatic row with Beijing, China, with remarks in Parliament last week that a Chinese attack on Taiwan could amount to a survival-threatening situation, as if Fukushima wasn't, and trigger a military response from Tokyo. Really, Tokyo going to attack China? When was the last time China had a war again? North Korea, when he went to try to help North Korea from being slaughtered by UN. Police action / 195 militaries. Wrote Taiwan on X and commented that the dirty neck that sticks itself out must be cut off, prompting a protest from Japan's embassy in Beijing to Chinese Vice Foreign Minister Su Weidong. Some crazy stuff, man. Fossil fuel lobbyists outnumber all Conference of Parties delegations except Brazil, said the reports. 1,600 fossil fuel lobbyists have been granted access. Well, you gotta, like, you want a pavilion here, you gotta spend $500,000, $500,000. That's to keep any kind of reasonable person editor. So, I mean, my goodness, right? Imagine having a flea market where you charge $500,000 to set up your booth. Who got that money to write off, to throw it? Well, nobody's throwing it away, they're writing it off. Taxpayers are paying for it. Last year, They paid for a kids' pavilion because they were there protesting fossil fuels. Said, "Oh, they're so darling. Let's get them their own pavilion so the pervs can ogle the shit out of them." To the COP, Conference of Parties 30 Climate Negotiation, Belém. Climate negotiations. With 30 years of climate negotiations from the constipated parties. According to the analysts by Big Polluters Out coalition, what are they getting put on the pedestal for? Because they're the control opposition, right? It brings the total number of fossil fuel lobbyists given access to United Nations Climate Summit to 7,000 over the past 5 years. Yeah, well, UN's doesn't give a shit about anything, only getting you to fall for their Ponzi scheme. A period marked by a rise in catastrophic extreme weathers for the last 5 years. Yeah, which happens to correspond with post-Fukushima. That's quite the coincidence. Fukushima gets no love. In the lead-up to Conference of Parties, hundreds of people were killed after two powerful typhoons wreaked havoc less than a week apart in the Philippines. Yeah, just because the Philippines get 20 typhoons a year. But they're very powerful, right? And how many died back there after Fukushima? Just one typhoon? 14 million people evacuated. It was 10,000 plus died. That was the Fukushima effect, the radioactive fallout effect. A country that's been hit by 21 significant storms this year alone. Yeah, well, everything's a supercell typhoon post-Fukushima. All typhoons are supercell typhoons, supercell cyclones, supercell hurricanes, and derricos. These are supercells post-Fukushima. That's a normal storm now. But nobody has building infrastructures for those type of winds. Because pre-Fukushima, we never had that kind of stuff. Well, we've seen these adverse effects after all the nuclear testing, right? Even the underground testing was vented right into the environment. Nothing's contained. And so they're trying to use the Philippine typhoon during typhoon season as justification for their climate change narrative, right? Climate change is real, but it's not from carbon. The more carbon, the more birds and plants and trees and flowers and fruits and puppies and pizza. Meanwhile, it's expected to cost Jamaica billions of dollars and years to recover from Hurricane Militia, which is Militia. Militia is the better name for it. Category 5 storm. And all the media said it was 185 mile per hour winds. Right? And, I done a video about that, and I showed you all those headlines, 185 mile per hour. None of them done a gust estimate, which would have been 250 mile per hour to even maybe 300 miles per hour. 250 is 400 kilometers per hour, for instance. You can be unquestionably assured that if the wind is blowing 185 mile per hour, it was gusting somewhere in that area at 400 kilometers an hour, 250 miles per hour. Turbocharged by global heating, turbocharged by radioactive fallout heating up the planet for 80 years and in a pulse event known as Fukushima. Fukushima was a pulse event. Yeah, and let's finish this one off. Fossil fuel companies continue to lead us into a climate abyss. Now it's the nuclear industry. Fossil fuel plumes of carbon means more birds, more phytoplankton, more bases of the food chain, more bases of the oxygen chain, more bases of the carbon sequestering chain. Bear with me. Let me explain United Nations nuclear stance for a second. They're not a regulatory agency, right? International Atomic Energy Agency, IRPA, UNSCLEAR, the IPRC, the International Atomic Energy Agency, IAEA say public trust to process the use of 30 million one-ton bags of radiation in Fukushima. Why would you want to use radioactive soil? It turns out that this is according to Anna Clark, right, at the UN, the IAEA rather, is not a regulatory agency. And so they're not in a position to judge or approve anything, let alone the soil or the water or anything else. Clark said, noting that the group's task is to make sure Japan's plan is in line with their safety standards. Well, if they're not a regulatory agency and they're not in a position to judge or approve it, then they have no authority. So why are they there to make sure that this corporation, everybody's following their so-called guidelines? But they're not a regulatory agency. Japan gets UN nuclear watchdog approval for water release. Well, UN doesn't own the oceans. It doesn't own anything. It's a corporate personhood. Adding that Japan would have the final say on the releases. In other words, they don't have the proof. Right? They're not a regulatory agency is what they're saying there. Remember, this UN gives Japan a stamp of approval for Fukushima water releases. Here's your piece of paper. Have a nice day. Now, where's my $19 million check again? Oh, we gave you that a couple of days ago. 2 days before this, they gave UN IAEA a $19.4 million check. International Atomic Energy Agency assures the safety of the water released from the Fukushima site. They assure it. But, just to protect their own horses, Rafael Grossi, Director General of the Ponzi scheme IAEA, reports that its document is not a recommendation or an endorsement, and that the Japanese government have the final say. So it's not a recommendation or an endorsement, it's irrelevant. So they're not a regulatory agency. They do that all the time. You'll find endless examples out there if you look for it. I'll finish with this. United Nations spokesperson says, as of 2023, McDonald's spokesperson says, as of 2023, measures have been taken to enhance transparency. Really? 12 years later. So that's clearer who participates at COP, Conference of Parties. And using the word COPs, which is an authoritarian word, right? That's a cowardly routine right there. Just as no single COP can be expected to solve the climate crisis overnight. So they use the word COP as the authority context twice in a row in just 2 sentences. That is wow stuff. So I ordered in a infrared sauna because you know me, I'm a sucker for punishment. I'm going to be using both saunas. It was $180, and because I found out that the infrared sauna, both saunas get used each day, by the way. And so I got the red light therapy. Woke up this morning, started exercising right away. Turned on the sauna. 15 minutes later, I was in the sauna, and so I'm not stiff or sore anymore, and full of energy for the rest of the day, which is mind-blowing if you think 1 week ago what kind of shape I was actually in. And infrared saunas will penetrate right into your body. And so you'll lose, sauna, you lose 3% toxin, 97% sweat. In an infrared sauna, you lose 20% toxin and 80% sweat. So you'll sweat out 20%, 70% more toxins than you do with a conventional steam. But a conventional steam has incredible good attributes. So I'm going to do a steam in the morning and then a infrared sauna, which is just heat pads. That heats up to 150 degrees. And so technology has changed a lot in the years that you can afford to get. These are quick and dirty versions, but they work. And I'll use them every single day now. So we're at day 6 today in a row with no sign of let up. I'm enjoying every second of it. Way more healthier. Just 6 days. If someone had told me after 6 days of red light therapy, saunas, and exercise, it would change my life on a dramatic scale, I would never believe it. And I'm telling you right now, it's true. Right? It's a poor health since I got hurt in a commercial diving accident, right? And that's changed my life. The sauna has, and the red light therapy literally changed my life in just 6 days. So now, you notice I'm doing the show, I'm way more energy. I don't need naps during the day. I'm active, and I'm not even started. I'm looking for real good results by summer rolls around. So I felt I was going to have to really work hard for 30 or 60 days before I can even get up to speed. I'm up to speed. Like, you wouldn't believe the difference. It's amazing. An interview with the father of global warming. So that's the first paper United Nations used to bludgeon humanity with. Then it was Miles Allen's net zero paper. Then it was BP Oil's campaign, the carbon footprint. And you heard that before? Yeah, that's where it came from. And then James Hansen, right, whose testimony was pivotal. His 15-minute testimony was pivotal. Call to action. What am I looking for? It was the official beginning of the global warming climate change policy debate. Right, so those 4 people, BP Oil happened to be a company, are the 4 papers that United Nations has used. And that's when they say the science is settled, it's those 4 papers. That's where that came from. And no, the science is never close to being settled. They don't tell people this is what they're basing their narrative off. None of these people were challenged, they're not even peer review. You got these 4 papers, you got global warming, right? Wallace Brocker, James Hansen, climate change, Allen's Miles for net zero, and BP Oil is carbon footprint. That's the 4 papers. They've been smothering and stomping out the 8 million species, and you're one of them. So I'm very optimistic by summer. I'm going to be way more useful, way more capable of doing field studies and research expeditions. I'm looking forward to it. We need to know. The world needs to know desperately. We thrive on the fields, but I've been pretty sick the last number of years. And I found a new lease on life with that equipment. And I'm not going to lose that opportunity. We got to get after these figures. My backup channel is a new channel on BitChute, which I'm pretty censored on. I got 1 subscriber. We had over 1,000 videos there. We got hacked and lost all of it. It is what it is. James had put out a couple of videos the weekend. And we're going to play one of those songs, or maybe 2 of them, who knows. Thermonuclear runaway. He has links below the video. That's James Lucid on YouTube. Thermonuclear runaway is about rivers where the nuclear plants are to are so hot they can't use them. Well, the glaciers are gone, see? And the reactors have to be shut down because they can run away. But they've run away now. They destroyed the ecosystem. And the moon bear attacks is the bears in Japan don't have any food in the forest. And James pinned together an incredible video, a song that helps articulate that. Have a great night, great day tomorrow. Hugs for everybody. Most likely we'll see you tomorrow night. Take care.
Rivers drop and a bit runs high. Less cool water than the system thought. Readings climb, circuits stall. Supervisor scans each call. Summer's burn creeps into the feed. Cooling loops shrinking with the need. Output cut, the logs don't lie. When thresholds sway and whites go dry. No tremor shakes the concrete benches rise and heat. The lines have bled. These loops weren't built for volume high. When river towns say goodbye, it's a thermonuclear runaway where warmer rivers stage the play. Vats of steamy throttle dries while baseload hope drifts like chaff. It's a thermonuclear runaway. The grid still leans the reactor's way. One flow, seal the faulty way. And no red flare lights the midnight air, just muted signals, looks of despair. No meltdown scream, no meltdown show, just latent failures nobody knows. It's a thermonuclear runaway where rise and flow rewrites the play. Demand still climb, but numbers slip and battles crack under the drill. It's a thermonuclear runaway. Coolings rule the system frames. Flow, seal the faulty way. Raise a glass to stealing schemes to midnight shifts and broken dreams. They'll speak of baseload night and day, but warmer flow said no more play.
There are more.
I'm gonna play that other song you put out with the bears. The bears are more attacks in Japan than in history. And I agree with James that the bear has no food anymore, see? It's a great song.
Ever since the Knoxville melted, the mountains have been acting trippy. One-ton bags slouch in the fields. Pines look exhausted and brittle, but sure must be the weather. Moon bear cups pour around the roots like a hello, where'd the food go? Used to mind their business up in Cedar Falls, crunching nuts, being cute, not raiding grocery dumpsters at noon. But here they are, behind mom and into parking lots like this is totally how life works now. Moon bear attacks, that's the flavor of the week. Shout danger instead of why the bears leave the mountains. Moon bear attacks, blame the bears, blame the claws. Never mind the missing food chain we kicked out from under their paws. Acorns don't fill a hole reaching for fun. Beach nuts don't vanish on a whim, but go ahead, call it mass collapse, call it climate change. Meanwhile the chain is obviously broken. When everyone knows it's only gonna get worse. The mountains remember the Fukushima core meltdowns. Even if people don't, we pave the fields with the